is February 29th, 2020. We're here at Dr. Tien Nguyen's home, interviewing him for the Houston Asian American Archive. My name is Priscilla Lee.
My name is Gordan Liu.
Okay, so the first question is, where and when were you born?
I was born in North Vietnam in a small province called Hai Duong, about 50 kilometers from Hanoi.
Okay.
And I was born in 1941.
How would you describe the household you grew up in?
Can you say it again?
How would you describe the household you grew up in?
I was born in a village, but not in the city. So I was a country boy until I was 10, before we came over to live in the city. So from the age of 1 to 6, I think it was peaceful. But from the 6 until the age of 10 or so, this is a war between the French and the Vietnamese. And we had to move from one village to another to avoid the fighting. And sometimes we had to live along the river on a boat. And so there was, until the age of 6, I had a very peaceful childhood in the countryside, and it's very nice.
Did you have any siblings?
I have at that time I'm the oldest in a family of 10, but during that time there were only 4 of us.
Okay.
What responsibilities did you have as the oldest sibling? What responsibilities did you have as the older sibling?
At that time I'm the oldest one, but I'm still very young.
Yeah.
So not much responsibility. But later on, being the eldest son in a family of 10, at one time all my brother and sister lived with me. And they are under my care for everything. But my parents, sometimes they were busy, and that's why they want almost all my brother and sister to live with us. That means me and my wife.
What did your parents do for their jobs?
My mother was just a housewife. She doesn't work. But when both of them were in the countryside, they were landowners. So like farmers, but they don't do farming. They hire people to do farming for them. So they had an easy life in the countryside. But as the war progressed, we had to leave the countryside to move to the city. Then my father had to work as a teacher, and then later on he worked with the government. And my mother, she was too busy with all of us, so she has to stay home as homemaker.
So do you know how many places you moved to? You said you moved from village to village.
I don't recall much, but we had to move from one village to another. Mm-hmm. At one time we had to live, and most of the time we had to live in Catholic villages, because Catholic villages were relatively safe in terms of any problem with the French soldiers because they tend to respect the village that are 100% Catholic. So at times we're not Catholic, but we lived in Catholic villages during the war in Vietnam, in North Vietnam. The war, between the Viet Minh, the Vietnamese communists, and the French. They call it First Vietnam War.
Were you expected to practice Catholic religion, or you just lived in the village?
No, none of us was Catholic at that time.
But do you practice any other religion?
My parents, they're Buddhist, but my wife is Catholic. My children are Catholic. I'm not yet of anything yet. So.
Okay. And then you said you moved to the city. What city was that?
It's a city of Hai Duong. Haiduong, 50 kilometers from Hanoi. Hai Duong at that time is safe because it is one of the provinces controlled by the nationalist Vietnamese government, allied with the French. And they are allied with the French to fight the Vietnamese communists, which is the other side of the war. So we joined my father left the Viet Minh side and he joined the nationalist side of the Vietnamese government, and he worked for the Vietnamese government.
Do you know why he switched?
There are a lot of people that were switching. I have no idea exactly why, but one of the reasons is he didn't like the communism. He didn't like the way they control the people. So that's why he left their front and joined the nationalist front.
So can you describe your schooling in Vietnam? Like any subjects that interested you in school?
Well, you're talking about the time when I was young in Vietnam, in North Vietnam. Yeah, I was in primary school. So because the war, most of the time we had homeschooling. My parents hired a teacher and teach the few of us at our home.
How would you describe the values that your parents raised you with? The values that your parents raised you with, how would you describe them?
I don't quite understand. So can you use the other wording?
What did your parents want you guys to, what did they want you guys to prioritize, and what did they teach you guys how to be the best people you guys could be?
Well, like I said, during the war, when I was young and when I was at the village, I have homeschooling by home teacher. So mainly, I think they put stressing on how to read, how to do calculations more than anything else. But as soon as I was in the city, I attended public schools. And public schools in Vietnam at that time was pretty good. Everything was in Vietnamese. It's not in French anymore.
How old were you when you moved to the city?
I was 10 when I moved the city.
Okay.
And it was in 1951 or something, when I became a city boy. And I lived in the city of Hai Duong for about 2 years, and then I moved to the Hanoi, which is the capital city, which was capital city of the North at that time. I lived in Hanoi and attended high school in Hanoi for about 1 year before we moved to the south because of the separation of Vietnam into two countries at that time, North and South Vietnam.
How would you describe that move, like during those years?
In 1954, there was a ceasefire agreement between the Vietnamese communists, and the French. And Vietnam was divided in two countries, North and South. North belonged to the communists, and Vietnam became a communist North Vietnam. And the South is a nationalist Vietnam, is called Republic of South Vietnam. So at that time, people were given 300 days to decide the area they like to settle down. So that means that people from either side, they have 300 days either to stay in where they are or move to the regime of their choice. So I think almost 1 million North Vietnamese decided to move south, just not to be with the communist North. And our family was among those people moving to the south. So we moved to the south and settled in the south.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And to become citizen of the South Vietnamese government, South Vietnam, Republic of Vietnam.
And you said your father worked for the nationalists?
My father worked with the government at that time, so we did not have any problem when we moved south as a whole family, because he worked with the government, whether he is in north and south. It's still the same salary, everything. But anyway, the settlement of our family in the south was very smooth. And I think mainly due to the efforts of the South Vietnamese president at that time, President Gordan. So he did very good job in settling 1 million North Vietnamese refugees in the south. And within a very short time, we are well settled in the south, well integrated into the life of in the south. And naturally, we speak the same language, so we are still speaking Vietnamese. So even the accent a little bit different from North Vietnamese accent and South Vietnamese accent, but I think the settlement at that time of our family in the South was very easy and very smooth. And just like you move from Washington, D.C. to Austin, Texas here.
So did you continue high school in South Vietnam?
Oh yes. At that time I was in high school, and my whole school in Hanoi also moved with me to the south. So I attended the same school, same teachers, everything in the south.
Okay.
So the whole school moved south.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody student teachers.
Oh wow. Okay. I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but what city in the South did you move to?
The city in the South we lived is Saigon,
Okay.
which is the capital city of South Vietnam at that time.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a question? Okay. And then can you describe what happened or how your journey after high school, after graduating high school?
I graduated from high school in 1959. At that time, I was 18. I joined the military medical school to become a military doctor. The reason I joined the military school is I didn't have to pay tuition for that, and furthermore, I received stipends from the military to continue my study until I became a doctor in the military. At that time, I had to serve the army to pay back for my years at the medical school. But it was a military school, so I had to attend military training every summer. Instead of having a summer time, for me, I had to go for 2 months of training in one of the South Vietnamese military schools. So it's fun to be in the military training at different schools, one school each year. So it's a good experience. I enjoy that experience also.
How long was military school?
Hmm?
How long was military school?
How long?
How long? Mm-hmm. Like how many years? Sorry.
Oh, you're talking about the medical school?
Yes. Yeah.
The military medical school is the same as civilian school.
Okay.
And in Vietnam, it was 6 years. Right now, I don't know whether they changed it, but it's 6 years instead of 4 years in the U.S. But we had only 1 year pre-med.
Mm-hmm.
But in here, usually the pre-med years are 4. Before you can go into medical school. Medical school here is only for 4 years. But in Vietnam, we had 1 year pre-med, and then if we pass the exam, entrance exam, we go to the school, medical school, and the medical school at that time is 6 years.
Okay. How many people were in your class, like training to be a physician with you? How many people were in your class who were training as well?
The class size was very small at that time. I believe my class size about 30. Yes. Yeah, but this is military school. Mm-hmm. But the civilian school is about 150 or 200, or I think around that number, or usually less.
Okay. So can you describe what year did you graduate from military?
I graduated in 1966 from the military school and became a military doctor. So at that time, they sent me to serve in the military units in the second tactical zone. You know, at that time, South Vietnam was divided in 4 tactical zones, and each zone is controlled by different administrators and generals. So I served the South Vietnamese Army in a second zone, which included the coastal cities in the middle of Vietnam and also the highland areas in Vietnam.
And how would you describe what kind of duties did you have as a military doctor?
Can you say it again?
What kind of responsibilities did you have?
I served 4 provinces in the second tactical zone. The first province was Khánh Hòa. The second one was Ninh Thuận. The third one is Lâm Đồng, and the last one was Tuyên Đức all of them are next to one another, and some two were in the highland, two were in the coastal area. I was the commander of a clearance company, so in terms of medical support for the Vietnamese military at that time, we had about 4 levels of support for medical support. The first level is done by a called battalion surgeon. So the medical doctor was assigned to mainly each fighting battalion, and he is the head of a team of medics and first aid people, and his job was mainly to take care of wounded right at the field. And the second level of support is done by clearance company, which is my company. So we are second in the line, receiving wounded soldiers from the front line, and we do the triage, either to send them back to the front or to treat them if we cannot evacuate them, or first choice is do a triage, stabilize them, and send them back to the military hospital, which is about usually in nearby to our area of operation. And that's the second level. The third level, we have few hospitals. Almost each province we have a few military hospitals, and in which definitive treatment can be done within very short time. And the last level of support is called military general hospitals, and there were 2 of them, one in Saigon and one at the northern part of South Vietnam, which is the city of Huế or Da Nang. So so we had one general hospital in the south and one general military hospital up in the north. And the few hospitals, there were about 20 or something, or 15 or 20, I don't know exactly, but almost each province, almost we have one military few hospital to take care of the wounded. So the medical support for the fighting people, fighting soldiers in South Vietnam during the war, I think is very good, very well set up and very well manned. I have to say that due to our monopoly or superiority in the air, we control the airspace. So the transportation from the wounded from one point to another were usually carried out by helicopters, and mainly by U.S. military helicopters, and very efficient, very fast, to the point that the majority of our wounded soldiers were treated definitively at military hospital within an hour from the time they were wounded in the battlefield, which is very good, and it helps a lot in reducing the mortality, in hospital mortality of the wounded soldiers. It's much lower in the Vietnam War than in the Korean War. I think the mortality of wounded soldiers in the Vietnam War is around 1 or 2%, but in the Korean War is around 5 or 6%. So that means how fast they are. You see how fast they are transported from the battlefield to the hospital. And so I was the second in the line. The first line, I said, the battalion 8th station, and second in line is clearance company. I was commander of the clearance company working in those 4 provinces, in the second line of support. And the third line is a field hospital, and the fourth is a general hospital.
What kind of like lessons did you learn during your time as a military doctor?
Can
What kind of lessons did you or experiences that you had?
I think I gained a lot of experience in doing all kinds of surgery on them. I was well trained to be I call a military surgeon. That means to take care of the war injury mainly. So since I have to do surgery on so many of them, and I have to learn by myself, and mainly through books. So I gained a lot of experience doing surgery on them. And I'm very happy that I have a chance to use my knowledge and my skill to help them survive their injuries. And I always thank them for what they're doing. And so because they are at the front line, and because of them, I'm safe in the back, in the rear, to help them survive their injuries. So I'm very thankful to all of them, and every time I do my best to help them survive. But the worst scenario is to take care of the dead, because it's a very sad job to deal with the family of the dead soldiers when they come from all over the country to receive their loved one. So it is one of the sad part of my responsibility, where we have to deal with dead soldiers. Sometimes there was so many of them that and it takes days for their loved one to come from far away to take care of them.
How did you change as a person through your time in the military? How did you grow or change as a person through your time in the military?
How do I grow as a person? When I graduated from the military school as a military doctor, I was 26, 25. And I served about 6 years during the war in Vietnam as a commander of a company. So I had under me about 30 or 40 people, including doctors, pharmacists, and nurses and other technicians. So I have to say that it's sometimes not easy to be the one who make decision for all these things, and but life is much easier in the military because we work by military discipline. So you give order, and it's their job to obey your order. So giving orders, and you have to make the right decision at the right time. As far as the patient's care concerned, I think it's straightforward because we learn how to do the triage. So that means that when you receive a lot of patients at the same time, you have to make a choice to treat this one or not to treat. So we have to separate them into categories. Yeah, salvageable or not salvageable. The one that needs to be evacuated immediately, or the ones that need surgery immediately. You have to make the choice very quickly. And within a very short time you had to put a label on them, okay? Either for just the ones that would not need anything from us, the ones that would need immediate care because otherwise they would die very shortly. And either they lose their lives or they lose their limbs. So they are the first priority for us to take care of, either to send them back immediately to the hospital, and if we are not able to get the air evacuation, we have to do surgery on them immediately. And we have, at times we had to do surgery 24 hours straight because we not all the time we can get them evacuated to the back, to the hospitals. But military doctors were busy at times, but there are days we did not have anything, or very light casualties. But at a big battles, you have 50, 40 wounded easily. And like I said, along with them, we receive dead soldiers to take care of them until the family can come and take them back for burial in their place, in their cities.
Can you describe your view of the United States intervention in like the Vietnam War?
Can you say it again?
Can you describe like what you thought about the Vietnam War?
Well, my view on the Vietnam War varies from the time I was there and now when I'm older, when I see all the things. Okay, when I was there, I was very glad to have the U.S. military as our ally. And because of the U.S. intervention, we never thought that we were going to lose the war because South Vietnam was a very small country, and we want to be on our own. We don't want to be part of the big Vietnam, which is a communist country. So we want to be a free South Vietnam. And I was so glad to have the help from the U.S. Military to help us to maintain our independence. And at that time, I never thought that we're going to lose the war because we have an ally which is the leader of the free war and with American military power, which is tremendous. And so I was so complacent, like many of us, and we think we never lose the war. We may lose one city, but we'll get it back later on. But we'll never lose the war, and we never think that the American will leave Vietnam and leave us to fight for on our own. So we are so complacent. We rely too much on the U.S. support, and we forgot that we had to be self-sufficient. And maybe one of the weakness of the South Vietnamese in general at that time. That's my thinking about the U.S. Intervention. But at that time, we received everything from the U.S. My hospitals, my equipment, my everything was very well supplied by the U.S. So my view at that time was we're so glad to have help from the U.S. to help us fight the communist North, which like to unify us under the communist regime. And we like to be on our own, like West Germany, like South Korea. So we don't want to be incorporated into North Vietnam. into one country under the communist control.
And then, from your time in the military, how would you describe how did you come to the U.S.?
Can you say it again?
How did you come to the U.S. from Vietnam?
In 1972, there was a Paris Agreement, and there was ceasefire between the U.S. and the North Vietnamese. And at that time, we were thinking that there was peace. So I was discharged from the military to join the teaching staff in Saigon Medical School. And I became a surgeon at the teaching hospital in Saigon for about 2 years. And in 1974, I was sent to the United States for fellowship, 1 year fellowship. So it's supposed to be a very short time for my training, extra training in surgery in the United States for just 1 year fellowship. So that's why I was in the U.S. In October 1974.
And where in the U.S. did you do your fellowship? Where in the U.S. were you at for your fellowship?
I was sent to, first I was sent to Washington, D.C. for orientation as a foreign students, not medical only. We are very well treated by the U.S. government. We were well received by everybody at the Department of State. We were introduced to American life, American history, American government system, and we were invited to the Kennedy Centers and to the museum, everything. So I spent 2 weeks as a foreign student in Washington, D.C. And then I was sent to the place where I did the fellowship. The first place was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it was in the middle of winter at that time. So it was too cold for people like me coming from a tropical climate to a very severe winter time in Pennsylvania. So within a month or so, I asked to be moved to the south, and they approved my request. I was sent to San Antonio, and I love the weather in summertime, in the winter time in San Antonio, which is very, very, very easy for me. It's not severe winter. So I stayed in San Antonio until April 75, when the South Vietnamese government ceased to exist, because in April 1975, South Vietnam was defeated, and North Vietnamese came to take over, and there was a unification of North and South to become a socialist Republic of Vietnam. So suddenly I am a stateless citizen. So by that time I was given a choice to become a refugee in the United States or to register to go back through the United Nations refugee program. So there were only 2 choices, and my choice was to stay in the U.S. as a refugee. And I was granted the refugee status in May 1975.
Can you talk more about, or So how did your family was still in Vietnam at that time? Your
The-
family was still in Vietnam.
My family was still in Vietnam
Okay.
when I was in U.S. to do my fellowship. But before the end of Vietnam War ended when the communist soldiers took over Saigon in April the 30th. My family left South Vietnam, left Saigon 3 days before that. So it's the 27th. My wife and my 3 small children were in Subic Bay already at the time. And later on, they joined me in the U.S. as refugee as well.
And you said Sweet Bay?
Subic
Oh,
Bay.
Subic Bay.
Subic Bay.
Oh.
It's a U.S. Navy base in the Philippines.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Subic Bay.
SUBIC.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then, how did you meet your wife?
How?
How did you meet your wife?
How did I meet? We lived in the same neighborhood, and her brother is a classmate of mine at high school. That's why I met her when we were very young. So yeah, I think we know each other for years before we got married.
What year did you marry?
It was in 1967.
Okay.
I was 24, 25 at that time. Just graduated from medical school.
And then going back to your beginning years in the United States, what kind of barriers did you experience?
I study medicine in French language with French teachers, so I was very familiar with the French language. But during the war, because sometimes I had to work with American military doctors, so I learned how to speak English a little bit. But before coming to the U.S. for my fellowship, where I attended the whole year the English classes as a second language, and I thought my English was very good at that time, until I met the doctor who came to greet me in Honolulu. And I found out that my English was terrible, was not enough for anything. But the biggest surprise is when I had to work in hospital in Pittsburgh as a doctor. And the majority of my patients were elderly Americans who have never met a foreigner, even foreign doctors. And naturally, because they are old, most of them are teethless. They have no teeth. They speak very differently, and very difficult for me to communicate. So it was a very difficult time for me to function as an intern during the first 3 months in the U.S. Because of the English barrier. And it took me a lot of effort to get used to the new language. And I think I was okay only after 3 or 4 months of work. Yeah. But even now, I've been here for over 40 years, I'm still not very comfortable with English. I feel much more comfortable with my native language, which is Vietnamese. So now I understand English better, I speak a little better, but it's still my second language, as you know. But the first 3 months as a doctor in the U.S. hospital was a terrible time for me, mainly because of the English language barrier. The most difficult things for me to grasp at that time is to listen people talking about numbers and names, and especially when I receive reports from the nurses through the telephone line. I had very difficult time understanding and grasping the names and the numbers they reported. And as you know, every time they report, you had to go with the name of the patient. Mm-hmm. And you had to go with the numbers of the lab work, lab data they receive. And those things are very difficult to catch when the listening is not that good yet. As far as the reading is concerned, I have no problem. As far as the writing is concerned, I have no problem. But listening and understanding the conversational English is very difficult. Was very difficult for me at that time.
How about like medical terms?
We had no problem with that because the medical textbook, I'm very fluent in English as far as reading and writing is concerned. The problem is conversation.
Were there other Vietnamese physicians that you worked with? Or
there were a few of us doing the fellowship at that time, but not like now, because at the time when I was in the U.S., very few Vietnamese. Then most of them were in the military doing their training in the U.S.
And you said you were in Honolulu?
I was in Honolulu as a stopover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was at the airport only, and I was greeted by an American doctor, and he was there to welcome me as a newcomer to the United States. Because you remember, I came as a student. So we're very well treated. They have people to greet us at the airport at Honolulu during just the 3 hours for stopover, and then they receive us. We're very well received when we arrive to Washington D.C. So if you come here as a fellow, yes, they will treat you that way. But you come as a refugee is different. I don't know. Whether people coming to the U.S. now to study, they will be received the same way, they're treated the same way like I were, but I was like the first class exposure. They treat us very well during the 2 weeks in Washington D.C.
What did you think about American culture in your first couple years here?
It's difficult for me, but I think we are very much well adapted because as you know, Vietnam was under the French domination for 100 years. So we are very much accustomed to European or Western customs, even European Western clothing, languages, everything. So it was not difficult for me as far as to get myself familiarized with the U.S. customs.
And then what was the year that you went to San Antonio to complete your fellowship year?
I was there for only 8 months. 8 months. In the South Vietnam government ceased to exist. Mm-hmm. So I became a refugee at that time. So my status was changed from a foreign citizen with the Vietnamese citizenship to status of a refugee in the United States. So as soon as I became a refugee, I had to think about a long-term life in the U.S. Not like before. Before I was here for only 1 year for my fellowship. And I finished 8 months already. 4 more months, I'll be back to Vietnam and teach at my Saigon Medical School. So the very, very good, very bright future was waiting for me in Vietnam. But everything collapsed on April the 30th, 1975, because I could not return. I became a refugee in the U.S.
And then, can you describe what happened after you finished your fellowship in San Antonio?
No, I did not finish my fellowship. I had 4 months, but since there was change in status from the refugee, from a citizen of South Vietnam to refugee status. So I had to decide whether to stay to finish my fellowship and then looking for a job, or to go to another training to become another kind of doctor. So at that time, I did a fellowship in surgery. That means I will become a surgeon. But to become a certified surgeon in the U.S., it takes 5 years of training. So since I was pretty old, since I was not in the mood for very long-term training, so I switched to anesthesiology and I joined the residency program at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. And the program for anesthesiologists at that time, for people like me with prior experience in surgery, was only 24 months. And I finished my residency at Baylor College of Medicine in 24 months to become a certified anesthesiologist. So I switched the specialty from surgery to anesthesiology because of the change in situation.
And during that time, your family had come over from?
Yes, my family were with me at that time. My wife and my children lived with us during that time because they came from Vietnam during the last few days before the end, and they joined me here in Houston.
Okay. And then, what did you do after you finished in?
After finishing my residency, I worked a very short time for the U.S. government. You call it U.S. Health Department in Louisiana, New Orleans, as an anesthesiologist in a public health hospital at that time. But after 8 months, I moved back to Houston and joined the teaching hospital of the UT system. It's called MD Anderson Cancer Center Hospital, which is the biggest cancer center in the South. And I joined as instructor in anesthesiology, and then I stayed there for 26 years until I retired in 2003. Okay. So I worked with the University of Texas system during the 26 years.
How would you describe your time as a teaching professor there?
We work hard. We work sometimes 10 hours a day. But we have worked with students, we work with residents, we work with medical students, we work with anesthesia students, we work with nurse students, everywhere. I think the only thing I remember is pretty busy because long hours and also a long drive coming from Sugar Land to work at the medical center. So I had working in anesthesiology. That means you had to wake up very early because you had to be ready for the surgeons when they cut around 7 o'clock. And so when I left the house, there's no sun. I don't see any sun. When I go home, it's already dark. But overall, I think I had a good time working at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and my hospital keeps on getting bigger and bigger during my time. So from a very small one, when I joined, it became a huge medical center. Now it's very big, and it's one of the best cancer center in the U.S. I think one of the two best. One up north, Sloan Kettering, and the MD Anderson Cancer Center is the best in the South.
How would you compare practicing or being a physician in Vietnam and being a physician in the U.S.?
Naturally, facilities are better, equipment is better, but for us, responsibility as physicians working in Vietnam or working in the U.S., working on Vietnamese patients, or working on U.S. patients, we have the same responsibility. So I didn't see much change. Whether my patients are Vietnamese or patients are American. So we have to do the best to take good care of them. And I don't see much change in that point. But as far as the facilities, equipment are concerned, naturally we have the best equipment, we have best facilities, we have best support in here, no doubt.
And then can you describe your involvement with the U.S. Army Reserve?
I graduated from the Vietnamese military school, so I love military life. I like to go to different military hospitals, and I love to work with soldiers and the people in the military. That's why I joined the reserve, in which I had 2 weeks training at different U.S. facilities in the United States, and I could attend a lot of courses provided to military doctors in the U.S. Army. So that's why I joined the U.S. Reserve. So one way I work here as a civilian doctor, but during the weekend I had military training at the U.S. Army Reserve here in Houston, and 2 months out of every year I was somewhere working with the military in the military hospital. So that's why I joined it. I love because I like military life.
And you did that for 8 years?
I was with the reserve for 8 years.
Okay. And then it says you did active duty in the operation.
Yeah, I was activated because of the Gulf War. They call during a desert storm. So during a desert storm, they sent all the active duty military doctors to the Middle East. And then, so they have to use reservist doctors to take care of all the military facilities in the U.S. So I was activated for 1 year. I stayed mainly at Fort Hood and Fort Sill During that time, we had training ready to go if the war became intense in the Middle East, in Kuwait at that time. And that means that anytime they can ship us out within very short notice because we are ready to go. They predicted that there will be a long fighting, but it turned out only 3 days. The war, the ground war in Kuwait lasted only 3 days. Therefore, almost none of the reservist doctors were sent to the Middle East. The people that were there are all active duty physicians. So I spent 1 year as active duty working at Fort Hood and Fort Sill in a situation where we were in 100% readiness to be shipped out day and night. But it didn't happen.
Did you have any questions? No? Okay. And then moving on to I guess your family life, what kind of Vietnamese traditions and cultures do you practice?
Can you say it again?
What kind of Vietnamese cultures and traditions, celebrations do you practice?
What kind of Vietnamese culture we are practicing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, after living almost, I think, 4 decades in the U.S., but I'm still very much Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. My children, they're more and more Americanized, but I'm not yet. Mm-hmm. I speak English better, but I speak Vietnamese much better. I write English good, but I write Vietnamese much better. So I think I'm an American citizen in terms of where I live, where my allegiance is. But culturally, I'm very much Vietnamese.
What kind of languages do you speak to your children in your house?
My children? Mm-hmm. I have 4 children. My daughter, who was born in she's 30 years now, 1982 or something. And she was the only one that I had time to teach Vietnamese to her. So she's the only one among my 4 children that can read and write and speak Vietnamese as a Vietnamese. Other children of mine, they are much more fluent in English than Vietnamese, but they can still understand the spoken Vietnamese, but none of them could write or read. So my daughter is the only one in the family who can read and write Vietnamese and speak with almost no accent.
And then, what would you consider are your major accomplishments in life?
In what?
In your life, what would you consider your major accomplishments?
Well, thinking back, I think I was lucky because I didn't have to participate as a fighting soldier in the war in Vietnam. I was very sad that we belong to the losing side of the war. So, as a loser, but I felt like we were lucky because we had the help of the people of the United States and the government of the United States in helping us to become a refugee and to help us settle in this country. As far as my major accomplishment in my life, I don't think I have anything, but I feel very lucky that I have a chance to help my fellow soldiers fighting the North Vietnamese during the war. And I like I said, I use my skill and my knowledge to help them survive the work experience in their lives, i.e. their being injury during the war. And I was so grateful that they were at the front line for me to work, to help them, to be able to be in the rear to help them survive the injury. So I always feel lucky, and I'm very thankful to all of them. And that's one of the things I always feel that I have chance to help them survive.
Have you gotten the opportunity to visit Vietnam again?
I visited Vietnam 4 times after my retirement in 2003. As a Vietnamese, I always like to visit Vietnam, and it's a very beautiful country. But I feel like it's not my country anymore because the people that are in power were my enemy at times. They are a little bit friendly to us now because I'm being treated as an American citizen. So if I live there now, I don't know how I'm going to be treated, because they are winners and we are losers. So at one time they treat us so badly. They put all of us in the prisons for years. Some of them are 30 years in the prison after the war, and many of them died during the imprisonment. So I'm not sure that even now, if I go back to live there as a Vietnamese under the regime, I don't know how I would be treated. Because if you're a loser, you are under their control. They're winners. And losers will lose everything, and winners will take all.
Since you've been in retirement since 2003,
yes.
What kind of activities have you been involved with?
I taught Vietnamese language at time for 6 years. Mainly now I'm teaching Tai Chi at the seniors. Yeah, I have been a Tai Chi practitioner for many years, over 15 or 20 years. And now I'm teaching Tai Chi at the Vietnamese senior centers to the senior people 1 or twice a week. And whenever I have chance, maybe I will teach Vietnamese again to young children.
So it seems like you've had a lot of teaching roles throughout your life. What brings you back to teaching, and what do you love about teaching other people?
I like the military, but I also like teaching job because I have been mainly a teacher at Saigon Medical School, and then at MD Anderson Cancer Center. So working with the students, whether they are doctor students or they are young, very young children, it's always fun and very. It's a learning process to work with them. You learn a lot from each student.
So besides teaching, what other ways do you give back or want to give back to the community?
It's a difficult question for me to answer.
Okay.
But I'm giving lectures on medical field at the radio station here occasionally, and I'm giving lectures on health topics occasionally at some Vietnamese gathering to use my knowledge for help others to understand the medical problems.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the Vietnamese American community in Houston and how it's changed over time?
One thing is Vietnamese American community in Houston is big, because as far as I know, it's the second largest group of Vietnamese after California. So, and I can see diversification. See, there's so many Vietnamese TV stations, and so many Vietnamese, 5 or 6 TV stations, and there's 2 or 3 radio stations. But and also I will see a lot of achievement of individual Vietnamese students. But as far as for community, I haven't seen a concerted effort to progress as a community within the American life yet.
What do you want your legacy to be for future generations? What impact do you want to leave behind you?
Can you say it again?
What legacy do you want to leave behind you for the future? What impact do you want to make?
Well, I don't think I can have the impact after I go. Yeah, it's not easy to make good of your life and leave a legacy. And I don't think I have anything to leave behind.
How would you want your children or grandchildren to remember you as?
Well, they will remember as a provider to help them progress in their education, and to take care of them when they were young, and do my best to help them to have a good education.
So I think, do you have any questions? Okay, no? Okay, so that kind of concludes our interview, but before it's concluded, I wanted to ask if you have any other things that you wanted to talk about that wasn't talked about.
I think we cover almost everything I want to say, and thank you very much for interviewing me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen.